I remember the exact moment my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Standing in my daughter Olivia's pristine kitchen, suitcase still by the door, as my son-in-law Brandon casually mentioned they'd made other arrangements for the holidays. The carefully rehearsed way he said it, the way Olivia couldn't meet my eyes, the painful silence that followed. After driving 6 hours from Maine with homemade cookies and carefully wrapped presents, I was being turned away from a home I'd helped them buy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. We just need our space this year, he explained with that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. The children are at a delicate age. Too much stimulation isn't good for them. As if their grandmother of all people was some disruptive stranger. I swallowed my pride and kissed my grandchildren. Goodbye, promising to call them on Christmas morning. I checked into a hotel, alone for the first time during holidays in 38 years. 3 weeks later, Brandon called. His voice was different, warm, almost desperate. Their dream home opportunity had arrived, but they needed a co-signer with more substantial assets for the loan. Funny how quickly needing space turns into needing my signature when a $3 million Tudor mansion is at stake. I never imagined I'd be starting over at 62. That's not how life was supposed to unfold. Robert and I had mapped it, all out. Retirement, traveling, being hands-on grandparents. But life rarely follows our carefully laid plans, does it? I met my husband, Robert Jenkins, during my second year teaching special education at Cedar Falls Elementary. He volunteered for our school fundraiser, a quiet man with kind eyes who managed other people's money with the same care he'd later show our family. We married within a year, and our daughter Olivia arrived exactly 9 months later. Our little miracle. Those early years were tight financially. Teaching special needs children filled my soul, but not our bank account. Robert was still building his financial advisory business, working 12-hour days to establish himself. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom ranch house, saved every penny we could, and focused on giving Olivia the best possible future. Even back then, I noticed Olivia's fascination with beautiful things. While other children asked for toys, she'd point at glossy magazines, at houses with grand entrances and expansive lawns. One day, she'd say with complete certainty, "I'm going to live there." Robert and I would exchange glances, half proud of her ambition, half concerned by her materialism. As Olivia grew, so did our finances. Robert's practice flourished. He had a gift for making cautious investments that yielded steady returns. Not dramatic wealth, but comfortable security. We upgraded to a larger home in a better school district. We funded Olivia's college education at Dartmouth without her needing loans. We helped her secure an internship at a prestigious marketing firm where she eventually built her career. When Olivia brought Brandon home during her senior year of college, I sensed immediately that he saw her, and by extension, us, as stepping stones. He came from old money that had mostly disappeared, leaving only the name and the expectations. He was handsome, charming, and spoke passionately about his ambitions in real estate development. But there was something calculated in his attentiveness to Robert, something performative in his interest in our family history. "He's just nervous," Olivia defended when I gently voiced my concerns. "He admires Dad so much. You'll see. He's different when you get to know him." And for a while, I wanted to believe her. Their wedding was beautiful, if extravagant for our means. Robert and I contributed significantly, wanting her day to be perfect. Brandon's family, the Parkers, attended with their designer clothes and critical eyes, clearly assessing whether Olivia was a suitable match for their son. Their approval seemed to hinge entirely on the lavishness of the event, rather than the love between the couple. When Olivia and Brandon announced they were house hunting in Riverdale Heights, one of the most expensive suburbs in Connecticut, Robert expressed concern about their overextension. Brandon took offense. "This is exactly where we need to be. For my business connections," he insisted. "Sometimes you have to present success to achieve it." Robert and I ended up contributing $150,000 toward their down payment, nearly half our retirement savings, to help them secure a colonial-style house in the right neighborhood. We told ourselves it was an investment in their future, in our relationship with our future grandchildren. Brandon assured us it was temporary assistance. His business would take off soon, and he'd take care of everything. Then came Max, our first grandchild. I took extended leave from teaching to help Olivia through those first challenging months. I cooked, cleaned, did midnight feedings, and gave her breaks when postpartum depression left her tearful and overwhelmed. Brandon was conspicuously absent during this time, always at crucial business meetings or networking events. I'd often return to our hotel late at night after helping Olivia to find messages from Robert describing the quiet of our empty home. "We miss you," he'd write, "but they need you more right now." Sophie arrived 3 years later, and I repeated the same support process. By then, Robert had been diagnosed with early-stage heart disease. The doctor recommended reduced stress and regular checkups. Nevertheless, he drove the 6 hours to Connecticut several weekends a month so we could both be present for our grandchildren. Brandon's real estate ventures remained perpetually on the verge of success, always one deal away from the big breakthrough. Occasionally, he'd share promising updates or take us to elaborate dinners to celebrate potential partnerships. In retrospect, those dinners seemed strategically timed around their mortgage refinancing or private school tuition deadlines. When Robert's health deteriorated more rapidly than expected, I reduced my teaching to part-time so I could care for him. The medical bills mounted despite our insurance. Olivia visited occasionally, always bringing the grandchildren, which brightened Robert's days immeasurably. Brandon came less frequently, usually calling with last-minute work emergencies. On Chai, one of his better days, about 7 months before he died, Robert spent several hours on the phone with his investment partner, James Whitaker. They'd been friends since college, building their financial advisory business together before managing separate client portfolios. I thought nothing of it at the time. They often consulted on investment strategies. Later, I'd learned the true purpose of those conversations. Robert passed away on a Tuesday afternoon in April. He'd been reading to Max and Sophie over video chat just that morning, promising to take them fishing once Grandpa gets stronger. By sunset, he was gone. A final massive heart attack that came swiftly, at least sparing him prolonged suffering. Olivia was genuinely devastated. For 2 weeks, she stayed in Maine helping me arrange the funeral and begin sorting through Robert's affairs. Brandon attended the funeral, but returned to Connecticut immediately after, citing a can't-miss opportunity with international investors. In the fog of grief that followed, I was barely aware of signing papers that Thomas Chen, our family lawyer, placed before me. Insurance documents, property transfers, bank accounts. I trusted the process, focusing instead on the crushing absence in our home, the silence that followed me from room to room. As months passed and the initial shock faded, I began contemplating my future. Our house felt too large, too full of memories. The grandchildren were growing up in Connecticut, missing the everyday moments I longed to witness. After 35 years of teaching children with special needs, I'd taken early retirement to care for Robert. Now I had no husband, no career, and a bare daughter living 6 hours away. I sold our Cedar Falls home, generating a modest profit in Maine's growing housing market. Combined with Robert's life insurance and our savings, I had approximately $780,000. Enough, I calculated, to purchase a small condo near Olivia and still maintain financial independence. I could be present for my grandchildren while giving their parents necessary space. It seemed the perfect solution. I called Olivia to share my plans, expecting her excitement. I've been looking at condos in Riverdale, I explained. Nothing extravagant, just a small 2-bedroom within 15 minutes of you. Her response was oddly hesitant. That's a big decision, Mom. Have you really thought this through? Connecticut's cost of living is much higher than Maine. I've done the calculations, I assured her. It's tight, but manageable. And being near you and the children is worth every penny. Let me talk to Brandon, she said. We should discuss this as a family. The next day, Brandon called with concerns about my hasty decision-making while still grieving. He suggested, I wait at least a year, perhaps rent temporarily if I insisted on relocating. His argument sounded reasonable, even caring, but something in his tone felt off, as if he was constructing barriers while pretending to remove them. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Nevertheless, I took their advice. I rented a small furnished apartment in Riverdale Heights with a 6-month lease, allowing me to test the waters before committing to a purchase. I arrived in early November, eager to help with Thanksgiving, preparations, and experience a full holiday season with my family. The first week went relatively well. I visited their home daily, took the children to the park after school, and prepared meals that Brandon particularly praised. Olivia seemed genuinely happy to have me nearby, often calling midday to check if I could pick up the children or handle small errands. I felt useful, connected, needed. But as Thanksgiving approached, I sensed a shift in Brandon's demeanor. He began mentioning their packed social calendar and the importance of maintaining connections with the right circles. Invitations to dinner became less frequent. When I was at their home, he'd take business calls in the next room, his voice carrying, as he mentioned, exclusive holiday gatherings and intimate family celebrations. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I drove to their house with ingredients for my traditional cranberry relish and pumpkin cheesecake, recipes that had been highlights of our family celebrations for decades. I'd barely unloaded the groceries when Brandon entered the kitchen, Olivia hovering anxiously behind him. Eleanor, he began with practiced casualness, we've been meaning to talk to you about the holiday arrangements. The grocery bags were still on the counter. The refrigerator door was open. I remember these details vividly, the mundane backdrop to the moment my world shifted. We've been invited to spend Thanksgiving with the Whitleys, Brandon continued. Richard Whitley heads the investment group I've been courting for months. This dinner could secure our future. That's wonderful, I said, continuing to unpack cranberries and cream cheese. What time should I arrive? I'll bring these dishes. A weighted silence followed. Olivia stared at the floor. It's an intimate gathering, Brandon explained, his smile not reaching his eyes. Very exclusive. The Whitleys are particular about their guest list. I stopped unpacking, the realization dawning slowly. You're not including me in Thanksgiving. Brandon cleared his throat. It's strictly business, Eleanor. We couldn't decline. And Christmas? I asked quietly. New Year's? Olivia finally spoke, her voice small. Brandon's mother has arranged a skiing trip to Vermont for Christmas. It's already paid for. A gift from her. I see. I carefully placed the cranberries back in the bag. And where are Max and Sophie spending Thanksgiving if you're networking? The Whitleys have children their age, Brandon said quickly. It's a family event, just not extended family, I finished for him. Mom, please understand, Olivia pleaded. This is important for Brandon's business, for our future. I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her. The designer clothes that didn't quite fit her budget. The highlighted hair that required monthly maintenance. The careful makeup that concealed the stress lines around her eyes. She was trapped in a life she couldn't afford, desperately trying to maintain appearances for a husband whose ambitions constantly exceeded their means. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what was happening. Instead, I simply asked, "And where should I go for the holidays, Olivia?" Brandon answered before she could. I hear the Riverside Hotel does a lovely holiday package. Very elegant. Or perhaps you'd prefer visiting your sister in Arizona. The weather's much better there this time of year. My sister had died 3 years ago from breast cancer. Brandon had sent flowers to the funeral but hadn't attended, citing an unmissable property showing. The fact that he'd forgotten, or never bothered to remember, this significant detail crystallized everything for me. I gathered my grocery bags without another word and walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Olivia's whispered, "Mom, wait." But Brandon's firmer, "Let her process this," stopped her from following. As I placed the bags in my car, Max and Sophie ran out from the backyard where they'd been playing. "Grandma, are you making cheesecake?" Max asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Not today, sweetheart," I managed, kneeling to hug them both. "But you always make cheesecake for Thanksgiving," Sophie insisted, her small brow furrowed in confusion. "Grandma won't be joining us for Thanksgiving this year," Brandon explained, suddenly appearing in the doorway. "Grandma has other plans." The look of disappointment on their faces nearly broke me. I hugged them tighter, promising to see them soon, though I had no idea when that might be. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Brandon had his arm around Olivia's shoulders, guiding her back inside. My grandchildren stood in the driveway, still waving, growing smaller with distance. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my rented apartment, watching holiday parades on television and trying not to think about the empty chair at the Whitley's table that could easily have accommodated me. I prepared a small turkey breast and a single portion of cranberry relish, maintaining traditions even in solitude. The phone call from Olivia came late that evening, her voice slightly slurred from wine. "Mom, I'm so sorry. It wasn't my idea. Brandon insisted it would be awkward to bring you." The Whitleys were awful, showing off their vacation photos from Bali and bragging about their children's private tutors. She paused, then whispered, "I wish you'd been here instead." I forgave her, of course. She was my daughter, caught between loyalty to her mother and submission to her husband. But something had fundamentally changed in our relationship. A trust broken, a boundary crossed. December arrived with forced cheer and calculated distance. I was permitted carefully scheduled visits with the grandchildren, afternoon outings, to approved locations, always returning them promptly for dinner. Brandon ensured I understood these were accommodations in their busy holiday calendar. Olivia frequently texted apologetic messages about last-minute cancellations due to important holiday functions. The final blow came a week before Christmas. I'd been invited for a brief gift exchange before they departed for Vermont, a 2-hour window on December 23rd deemed acceptable in their schedule. I arrived with carefully selected presents: a chemistry set for science-loving Max, an illustrated astronomy book for curious Sophie, a cashmere sweater for Olivia that had stretched my budget considerably. As the children excitedly unwrapped their gifts, Brandon announced he needed to discuss something with me privately. In the kitchen, away from eager little ears, he explained their holiday plans had changed. "Diane's ski lodge reservation fell through," he said, referring to his mother. "But we've secured an even better opportunity. The Andersons have invited us to their Aspen compound. James Anderson is the biggest developer in the Northeast. This could be transformative for my career." "I understand," I said quietly, already anticipating the next part. "The thing is," Brandon continued, checking his Rolex, a recent purchase I'd questioned given their financial situation, "they're very particular about their guest list. Very exclusive. And I'm not included," I finished for him. "It's strictly business contacts and their immediate families," he confirmed, not meeting my eyes. "Diane will be there, of course, as my mother, but I was disposable, unnecessary, an inconvenience to their social climbing." "I see. I said simply. I knew you'd understand, Brandon replied, squeezing my shoulder. You're always so reasonable, Eleanor. I nodded, swallowing the hurt. When do you leave? Tomorrow morning, early flight. His phone buzzed, and he checked it immediately, already mentally elsewhere. Listen, while I have you alone, we should discuss something important after the holidays. A business opportunity that could benefit all of us. But not now. Too much chaos. I recognized the strategy, the dangled carrot of inclusion, the promise of future consideration. It was the same technique he'd used countless times with Robert. That evening, after tearful goodbyes with my grandchildren, who couldn't understand why Grandma wouldn't be celebrating Christmas with them, I returned to my empty apartment. The small artificial tree I'd decorated seemed suddenly pathetic, the wrapped presents beneath it meaningless without the children's excitement. For the first time since Robert's death, I allowed myself to truly cry. Not the quiet tears of grief I'd shed at his funeral, but raw, angry sobs that came from the deepest part of me. I cried for the holiday traditions abandoned, for the grandchildren, being taught that their grandmother was optional, for my daughter slowly morphing into someone I barely recognized. And I cried for Robert, who would have never allowed this to happen, who would have stood firm against Brandon's manipulations, who would have protected our family's heart over social appearances. As midnight approached, I wiped my tears and made a decision. This would be the last holiday I spent alone, the last time I accepted being an afterthought in my own family's life. Something needed to change. What I didn't realize was how soon that change would come, or that it would arrive in the form of an urgent phone call from Brandon himself, just 3 weeks later. Part 2. The Moment of Truth. The holidays passed in a blur of loneliness. I volunteered at a local shelter on Christmas Day, finding some comfort in helping others even less fortunate than myself. I declined invitations from kind neighbors who couldn't bear the thought of that poor widow spending New Year's alone. I needed the solitude to think, to plan, to recalibrate my expectations. By mid-January, I'd made peace with returning to Maine. Connecticut clearly had no place for me. I began researching smaller communities near Portland where my teaching pension would stretch further. I contacted a real estate agent about listing my Cedar Falls home, which I'd been renting out, month to month. I even joined an online group for grandparents navigating long-distance relationships with their grandchildren. Then Brandon called. His voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Something almost like humility, though too calculated to be genuine. Eleanor, I hope you're doing well. We missed you over the holidays. The blatant lie nearly made me laugh. Did you? How nice. If he noticed my dry tone, he ignored it. Listen, something incredible has happened. An opportunity we've been waiting for. The Grayson estate on Lakeview Drive is finally coming to market. I remained silent, waiting for the point of this call. Eleanor, it's perfect. 7 bedrooms, indoor pool, guest house, 3 acres directly on the lake. The Graysons are only showing it to select buyers before the public listing. His voice grew increasingly animated. This is the house, Eleanor, the one that will cement our position in Riverdale society. That sounds lovely, Brandon, I said carefully. But why are you telling me this? A slight pause. Well, Olivia, thought you'd want to know. You've always been so supportive of our goals. I appreciate that, but I'm actually planning to return to Maine. My lease here ends in February. About that, he said quickly. We've been discussing your living situation. Having you in Maine seems so distant, especially from the children. The sudden concern for my proximity to the grandchildren, after effectively banishing me during the holidays, was transparently tactical. I waited. Eleanor, would you be able to come by the house tomorrow? Say around 10? There's something important we'd like to discuss with you. I agreed, curiosity overcoming my reluctance. The next morning, I arrived at their colonial to find both Brandon and Olivia waiting, unusually well-dressed for a casual family discussion. Brandon had prepared coffee in their expensive machine, something he'd never done during my previous visits. "Mom, you look great," Olivia said, hugging me with unusual enthusiasm. "Have you been doing something different with your hair?" I hadn't. My gray bob was exactly as it had been during the holiday rejection. I accepted the coffee and sat in the offered chair, waiting for whatever performance they had planned. Brandon didn't disappoint. He pulled out a folder of glossy photographs, professional shots of a sprawling Tudor mansion with manicured grounds and lake frontage. "The Grayson Estate," he announced proudly. Nearly 8,000 square feet of pure, architectural perfection. I nodded politely, paging through images of cavernous rooms with coffered ceilings, a kitchen larger than my entire apartment, bathrooms with heated marble floors. "It's listed at $3.2 million, Brandon continued. "But Richard Whitley, you remember, from Thanksgiving, has insider information that they'll accept $2.9 if we can move quickly." I looked up from the photos. "That's significantly more than your current home." "That's why this is so exciting," Brandon leaned forward eagerly. "The market has finally recognized my development work. The Aspen connection paid off. James Anderson is bringing me in on the riverfront project." Olivia jumped in. "It's a huge opportunity, Mom. 6 luxury buildings along the waterfront. Brandon will be heading the residential tower design." I nodded again, still waiting for the real purpose of this meeting. I didn't have to wait long. "The thing is," Brandon said, his tone shifting to something more careful, "we need to move quickly. The Williamsons and the Cutlers are both interested in the property. We need to demonstrate financial readiness immediately." "And how do you plan to do that?" I asked, though I was beginning to see where this was heading. Brandon and Olivia exchanged glances. She nodded encouragingly. "We've been pre-approved for the mortgage," Brandon explained, "but given the accelerated timeline and the competitive situation, the bank has requested additional security." "What kind of security?" Brandon cleared his throat. "A co-signer with substantial assets. Someone with excellent credit and significant liquidity." The real purpose of the coffee, the compliments, the sudden concern for my living arrangements became crystal clear. I set down the mug and looked directly at my daughter. "You want me to co-sign a $3 million mortgage?" "It's just a formality," Brandon interjected quickly. "With the riverfront project, my income will more than cover the payments. Your signature is just to expedite the process." I turned to him. "If it's just a formality, why not ask your mother?" "Diane has substantial assets, doesn't she?" His smile tightened. "Diane's finances are complex. She's asset-rich but cash-poor at the moment. Several investments are tied up." "I see." I looked back at the photos, thinking of my modest teacher's pension and the $780,000 that represented my entire life savings and security. And what happens if something goes wrong with the riverfront project? "Nothing will go wrong," Brandon insisted, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "This is a guaranteed success." "Nothing in real estate is guaranteed," I countered quietly. Robert taught me that much. Olivia reached for my hand. "Mom, this is important to us, to our future. The children would have so much space, a game room, a pool. Sophie could take the dance lessons she's been begging for." I looked at my daughter, recognizing the emotional manipulation but still feeling its pull. "Olivia, co-signing would put my entire financial security at risk. If anything happened, if Brandon's project fell through, if the market dropped, I could lose everything." "That won't happen," Brandon insisted. "But if it did," I pressed. "Then we'd figure it out as a family," Olivia said, squeezing my hand. That's what families do, right? Support each other through challenges. The irony was so thick I could hardly breathe. Support each other, like during the holidays? Olivia had the grace to look ashamed. Brandon, however, shifted strategies immediately. Eleanor, I know the holidays were complicated. We handled things poorly. But this is our chance to truly come together as a family. He leaned forward, voice softening. In fact, the guest house would be perfect for you. 2 bedrooms, its own kitchen, private entrance. You could have independence while being right. There for Max and Sophie. I stared at him. You're offering me the guest house, after explicitly excluding me from your holidays. People make mistakes, Brandon said smoothly. I misjudged the situation. But this is our opportunity to correct that, to create the perfect arrangement for everyone. I stood up, suddenly needing space from their expectant faces. I walked to the window, looking out at the yard where my grandchildren played, thinking of Robert and what he would advise in this moment. When do you need my answer? I asked finally. The showing is tomorrow at noon, Brandon replied. If we bring the pre-approval letter and co-signer documentation, we can potentially submit an offer on the spot. 24 hours to decide whether to risk my entire financial future for a family that had deemed me disposable just weeks earlier. I nodded slowly. I need to review my finances, consult my advisors. Of course, Brandon agreed readily. Take the time you need. He hesitated, then added, though if we could have your answer by breakfast tomorrow, it would be ideal for preparation purposes. I gathered my purse, declining their offer of lunch. As I reached the door, Brandon called after me. Eleanor, just so you know, the guest house has a perfect view of the lake. Imagine watching the sunrise every morning with your coffee. A new beginning for all of us. I nodded non-committally and left, my mind already racing with calculations and consequences. Back in my apartment, I spread my financial documents across the small dining table. The numbers didn't lie. Co-signing would be enormously risky. If Brandon's project failed, if his income couldn't support the massive mortgage payments, my savings and pension would be utterly inadequate as backup. I could lose everything Robert and I had worked for over 40 years. The rational decision was obvious. The emotional calculation was more complex. I thought of Max and Sophie, innocent in all this adult manipulation. Would refusing to help damage my already tenuous relationship with them? Would Brandon use my refusal to further distance me from their lives? As evening approached, I reached for my phone to call the one person who might offer objective advice. James Whitaker, Robert's longtime business partner, answered on the second ring. Eleanor, what a wonderful surprise. How are you holding up? The genuine warmth in his voice nearly undid me. I explained the situation as factually as possible, laying out Brandon's request and my concerns. James was silent for several moments after I finished. Eleanor, do you know why Robert spent so much time on the phone with me before he passed? Investment advice, I assumed. In a manner of speaking, James said carefully. He was deeply concerned about Brandon's financial acumen, about his pattern of overextension, about his tendency to use personal relationships for financial gain. The confirmation of Robert's concerns hit hard, though it wasn't entirely surprising. Robert wanted to protect you, James continued. He'd seen the pattern with Olivia and Brandon, the house down payment, the private school tuition loans that were never repaid, the temporary financial assistance that somehow became permanent. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times. Robert had expressed hesitation, only to give in to Olivia's pleading or Brandon's promises. Before I give you my professional advice, James said, there's something you should know, something that might affect your decision. I listened with growing astonishment as James explained what Robert had arranged in those final months, a carefully structured trust that would mature exactly 9 months after his death, designed to provide me with financial security independent of Olivia and Brandon's influence. He knew they'd come after your money eventually, James said quietly. Robert wanted to ensure you had options. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I asked, stunned by the revelation. The terms of the trust were specific. You weren't to be informed until either the maturation date or… He hesitated. Or until Brandon made a significant financial request that might compromise your security. I sat back, overwhelmed by this posthumous protection from a husband who had known our family dynamics better than I'd realized. How much? I finally asked. The original investment was modest, James explained. But Robert had a talent for identifying undervalued companies. One particular technology stock performed exceptionally well. He named a figure that momentarily stopped my breath. That can't be right, I whispered. I assure you it is, James replied. Robert's final gift to you, financial independence. The question now is, what will you do with it? As I hung up, staring at the modest apartment that had seemed my only option just hours earlier, an unexpected sense of calm settled over me. Robert had given me more than money. He'd given me freedom. The freedom to make choices based on my worth rather than my vulnerability. I spent the night considering my options, weighing alternatives, and crafting my response. By morning, I had my answer. I texted Brandon, I'll be at your house at 10 a.m. to discuss the co-signing request. When I arrived, both Brandon and Olivia were waiting anxiously. Fresh coffee, pastries from the expensive bakery downtown, even flowers on the table, all orchestrated to create an atmosphere of familial warmth that had been conspicuously absent during the holidays. Mom, did you sleep okay? Olivia asked, pulling out a chair for me. You look tired. I had a lot to think about, I replied, accepting the offered coffee but declining the pastry. It's not every day I'm asked to risk my entire financial future. Brandon cut straight to the point. Have you made a decision? The showing is at noon. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Yes, I have. Before I share it, I'd like to ask you a question, Brandon. His smile faltered slightly. Of course. You mentioned the guest house as part of this arrangement. Would my living there be a condition of my co-signing? Not at all, he replied quickly. It's an option we're offering, a benefit. And if I chose not to live in the guest house? If I preferred my own separate residence? Brandon and Olivia exchanged glances. That would be your choice, of course, he said carefully, though having you on the property would be convenient for the children. Convenient, I repeated. Like having me nearby when you need childcare, but not when you're celebrating holidays? Olivia flinched. Brandon's expression hardened slightly before he forced his smile back into place. Yeah, Eleanor, I understand you're still hurt about the holidays. That's fair, but this is a chance to move forward, to create a better arrangement for everyone. I nodded slowly. I've given this considerable thought. About my role in this family, about what obligation I have to support your ambitions, Brandon. They leaned forward expectantly. My answer is no. The silence that followed my refusal was deafening. Brandon's practiced smile faltered, then disappeared completely. Olivia's eyes widened in disbelief, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. No? Brandon finally managed, as if the word itself was incomprehensible. What? Do you mean no? I mean I will not be co-signing for your mortgage, I replied calmly. It's not a sound financial decision for me. Brandon's face flushed. He set his cup down with a sharp clatter. I don't understand. This is a guaranteed opportunity. The riverfront project will more than cover. Nothing in real estate is guaranteed, I interrupted gently. You're asking me to risk my entire financial future on your business projections. I can't do that. Olivia found her voice. Mom, this is our dream home. Our one chance at… At what, Olivia? Social advancement? Impressing the Whitleys and… Andersons? I sighed. Dreams need to be built on solid foundations, not precarious finances. Brandon's mask of civility slipped completely. I can't believe this. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, genuinely curious. What exactly have you done for me, Brandon? He faltered, clearly searching for examples. We've included you in our lives. Given you access to the children. Access, I echoed, as if my own grandchildren are a privilege you control, not a relationship I've earned. That's not what he meant, Olivia interjected quickly. It's exactly what he meant, I countered. Just weeks ago, I wasn't welcome in your home for the holidays. Today, you're offering me a guest house. The only thing that's changed is that now you need something from me. Brandon's expression hardened. This isn't just about us. Think of Max and Sophie. They deserve the opportunities this move would provide. It was a low blow, using the children, but not unexpected. My grandchildren would benefit far more from parents who live within their means than from a mansion their family can't afford. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Mom, please, we need this. I reached across the table and took her hand. No, sweetheart. You want this. There's a difference. Brandon pushed back from the table abruptly. This is ridiculous. We're offering you a place to live, proximity to your grandchildren, a chance to be part of something significant, and you're throwing it back in our faces. I remained calm. I'm declining to take on millions in potential debt. That's not the same as rejecting your family. Isn't it? He challenged, voice rising. Because it seems to me you're choosing your bank account over your daughter's happiness. That stung, as he'd intended it to. Olivia looked between us, clearly torn. I took a deep breath before responding. I raised my daughter to understand the difference between happiness and acquisition. To recognize that worth isn't measured by square footage or neighborhood prestige. I turned to Olivia directly. Did I fail so completely in those lessons? She couldn't meet my eyes. Brandon wasn't finished. We've indulged your interference for years, he said coldly. Accommodated your opinions, your visits, your constant presence. The one time we ask for something in return, you can't even consider it. Interference, I repeated quietly. Is that how you view my relationship with my family? Olivia found her voice again. He doesn't mean that, Mom. He's just disappointed. No, I think he does mean it, I replied, studying Brandon's face. I think he's finally saying what he's thought all along. Brandon didn't contradict me. Instead, he checked his watch theatrically. We need to leave for the showing in 20 minutes. The Cutlers will definitely make an offer if we don't. Is this really your final answer, Eleanor? I stood up, gathering my purse. It is. I wish you luck with the Grayson estate, but I won't be financially involved. Olivia followed me to the door, her voice hushed. Mom, please reconsider. This means everything to Brandon. To us. I know you believe that, I said gently. But someday you'll understand the difference between what builds a life and what merely decorates it. As I opened the door, Brandon called after me, his voice sharp with disdain. Don't come back here expecting things to be the same, Eleanor. Relationships go both ways. If you won't support us, don't expect us to accommodate you. I turned back one last time. Is that an ultimatum, Brandon? Support your financial ambitions? Or lose access to my family? He didn't answer directly. We all make choices. You've made yours. The threat hung in the air between us. Olivia looked stricken, but remained silent. I nodded once, understanding perfectly, and walked to my car with my head held high. Only when I was safely inside, doors locked, did I allow myself to feel the full impact of what had just happened, and what might follow. The drive back to my apartment passed in a blur. Brandon's thinly veiled threat echoed in my mind. Don't come back here expecting things to be the same. Would he really use my grandchildren as leverage? Would Olivia allow it? The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing. Inside my small temporary home, I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold, and considered my options. The phone call I needed to make was both necessary and daunting. After several deep breaths, I dialed James Whitaker again. They didn't take the refusal well, I explained after recounting the morning's confrontation. I'm not surprised, James replied. Brandon's type rarely handles rejection gracefully, especially when it disrupts his plans. What happens now? I asked. With Robert's trust? That's entirely up to you, James said. The funds are already accessible. The paperwork is ready when you are. And no one knows about this except you and me? Robert was explicit about confidentiality. The trust documentation is held securely in my office safe. No electronic records exist outside our secure system. I thought about this carefully. I'd like to keep it that way for now. May I ask why? James sounded curious rather than judgmental. I need to understand what happens next, I explained. How Brandon and Olivia respond when they think I have nothing to offer them. What? That reveals about our relationship going forward. A test, James observed. A clarity exercise, I corrected gently. I can't make informed decisions about my future if I don't understand the present reality. Robert would approve, James said after a moment. He always valued clear-eyed assessment over comfortable illusions. We agreed to meet the following week to review the trust documents in detail. As I hung up, a text message arrived from Olivia. Brandon's upset, but he'll calm down. Give him space. Love you, Mom. No mention of their showing, whether they'd found alternative financing, or if the Grayson estate dream had evaporated. Just a request for space, for me to make myself scarce until Brandon decided I was forgiven for my defiance. I didn't respond. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I busied myself with volunteer work at the local library, took long walks around Riverdale Heights, and began researching housing options. Not in Maine as I'd initially planned, but right here in Connecticut. Not in Olivia's immediate neighborhood, yet close enough to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren, regardless of Brandon's approval. 5 days after the confrontation, my apartment buzzer rang unexpectedly. Through the intercom, I heard Max's excited voice. "Grandma, it's us! We brought cookies!" I buzzed them up immediately, heart racing. Olivia stood in the hallway with both children, looking simultaneously apologetic and determined. "Mom, I'm sorry for just showing up," she began as I ushered them inside. "But the kids have been asking for you nonstop." Max thrust a slightly crushed bakery box toward me. "We got the chocolate ones with the sprinkles that you like." "My favorites," I confirmed, hugging them both tightly. What a wonderful surprise. Sophie looked around my modest apartment with curious eyes. "Why do you live here now instead of with us? Daddy said you don't want to be part of our family anymore." The innocent question landed like a physical blow. Olivia winced. "Sophie, that's not what Daddy meant. Remember we talked about this in the car?" I knelt to Sophie's eye level. "I will always, always want to be part of your family. Nothing could ever change that." Max frowned. "Then why can't we see you? Dad said you're too busy now." I glanced up at Olivia, who had the grace to look ashamed. "I've never been too busy for you," I told him firmly. "Not once." "That's why we're here," Olivia interjected quickly. "To fix things. The kids miss you. I miss you." I directed the children toward the small television with promises of hot chocolate to accompany our cookies. Once they were settled, I led Olivia to the kitchen area, keeping my voice low. "What exactly did Brandon tell them?" Olivia fidgeted with her wedding ring. "Nothing explicit. Just that you needed space from our family right now. That you had other priorities." That's manipulative, Olivia. They're children. I know, she admitted. That's why I brought them today. To show them it isn't true. I studied my daughter's face, noting the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. What happened with the Grayson estate? Her expression fell. The Cutlers got it. They came with an all-cash offer, no contingencies. We couldn't compete. I nodded, unsurprised. And how did Brandon take the disappointment? Not well, she admitted. He's been difficult, blaming everyone, mostly you. Me? I raised an eyebrow. I didn't accept the Cutler's offer. I know it's not rational, Olivia sighed. But Brandon had convinced himself this was our big break. When it fell through, he needed someone to blame, I finished for her. He'll get past it, she insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. Once another opportunity comes along. I considered my next words carefully. And until then? Am I to be persona non grata in your home? Olivia had the decency to look uncomfortable. That's why I'm here, to say that's not acceptable. You're my mother, the kid's grandmother. Brandon doesn't get to unilaterally decide your place in our lives. A small victory, but significant. Thank you for that, I said sincerely. But, she continued hesitantly, it might be better if visits happen here for a while, or at parks, restaurants, neutral territory. Because Brandon doesn't want me in your home. Just temporarily, she insisted, until things settle. I thought of countless family dinners I'd cooked in their kitchen, bedtime stories read in the children's rooms, holidays celebrated in their living room. All now forbidden territory because I'd refused to risk my financial security. That's not a sustainable solution, Olivia. You know that. She looked down at her hands. What choice do I have? Stand up to him, I suggested gently. Remind him that marriage is a partnership, not a dictatorship. Something flickered across her face. Fear? Resignation? It's not that simple. It never is, I agreed. But allowing him to isolate you from support, from family, is dangerous. Territory. He's not isolating me, she protested, but weakly. He's just hurt. Hurt people can still be manipulative, sweetheart. We were interrupted by Max calling from the living room, asking when the hot chocolate would be ready. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as I prepared treats and spent precious time with my grandchildren. They chattered about school projects, neighborhood friends, and the ski trip that had apparently been less enjoyable than anticipated. Daddy worked the whole time, Sophie confided. He was always on his phone talking about business stuff. And Grandma Diane kept saying my coat wasn't nice enough, Max added. She made Mom buy me a new one that was super uncomfortable. Olivia shot me an apologetic look. I kept my expression neutral, focusing on the children rather than the commentary. On Brandon's family dynamics, as they prepared to leave 2 hours later, I hugged each child tightly, promising to see them again soon. Olivia lingered in the doorway after sending them ahead to the elevator. I've missed our talks, she admitted quietly. Brandon doesn't. He doesn't understand certain things. Not the way you do. I'm always here, I reminded her. That hasn't changed. She nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. I'll call you tomorrow about taking the kids to that science museum they've been wanting to visit. Maybe this weekend? I'd love that. As I closed the door behind them, I felt simultaneously heartened and troubled. The bond with my daughter and grandchildren remained strong, but Brandon's influence created worrying undercurrents. His willingness to use the children as emotional pawns, to rewrite our family narrative to cast me as the villain. These weren't the actions of someone temporarily disappointed. They reflected deeper character issues that Robert had apparently recognized long before I had. The promised science museum outing materialized that weekend, followed by ice cream and a walk through the botanical gardens. Brandon was conspicuously absent, allegedly due to weekend meetings with potential investors. The children thrived in the relaxed atmosphere, away from their father's increasingly volatile moods, which Olivia referenced obliquely throughout the day. "He's just under so much pressure," she explained as we watched Max and Sophie examine exotic plants. "The riverfront project is taking longer to finalize than expected. Investors are hesitant." "Financial stress affects everyone differently," I acknowledged neutrally. "He's not usually like this," she insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. "Once everything's settled—" I let the sentence hang, unwilling to point out the pattern that was becoming increasingly clear. Brandon's behavior was perfectly pleasant when things were going his way. When faced with setbacks or resistance, his true character emerged, entitled, manipulative, vindictive. Over the next 3 weeks, a routine emerged. I saw the children regularly, but always away from their home. Olivia joined us frequently, our relationship strengthening despite Brandon's obvious disapproval. We never directly discussed his attempts to limit my involvement. Instead, Olivia worked around his restrictions, finding creative ways to maintain our family connections without triggering his resentment. Meanwhile, I met with James Whitaker to formally access Robert's trust. The figures were staggering, far beyond what I'd initially understood. Robert's investment had grown exponentially, resulting in assets approaching $2 million. With James's guidance, I established a conservative investment strategy that would generate comfortable monthly income while preserving the principal. "You understand what this means," James said as we finalized the paperwork. "You have options. Now, complete financial independence." "It's still sinking in," I admitted. "All these years of careful budgeting, stretching my teacher's pension." "Robert wanted you to have freedom," James emphasized. "Freedom to make choices based on what's right, not what's necessary." The first major decision came surprisingly quickly. A small but elegant condominium in a renovated historical building near Riverdale's town center came on the market. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, walking distance to parks and the library. The price, $875,000, would have been impossibly beyond my means just weeks earlier. Now I could purchase it outright and still have substantial resources in reserve. After viewing the property twice and consulting with James about the investment value, I made an offer. The sellers accepted immediately. Suddenly, I had a permanent home in Connecticut, one that would allow me to maintain close relationships with my grandchildren regardless of Brandon's machinations. I didn't immediately share this development with Olivia or Brandon. Instead, I focused on the closing process, arranging necessary inspections and paperwork. The closing was scheduled for February 28th, coincidentally, the day before my temporary apartment lease expired. The timing seemed providential, a fresh start exactly when I needed one. 2 days before closing, during our now regular Saturday outing with the grandchildren, Olivia mentioned casually, "Mom, have you decided what you're doing when your lease ends? Are you returning to Maine?" We were seated on a park bench, watching Max and Sophie navigate the playground equipment with increasing confidence. I'd been waiting for the right moment to share my news. This seemed as good as any. "Actually, I've decided to stay in Connecticut permanently," I revealed. "In fact, I've purchased a condominium not far from here." Olivia's eyes widened. "Purchased? But how? I mean, that's wonderful, but real estate here is so expensive." "I've been careful with my money," I said simply. "And this was the right investment for my future, for our future as a family." "Does this mean we can visit you at your new house?" "Grandma," Sophie called, having overheard our conversation from the nearby swing set. "Absolutely," I confirmed. "You'll each have your own bedroom for sleepovers." Their excitement was immediate and vocal. Olivia looked simultaneously pleased and confused. "I had no idea you were in a position to buy property here," she said quietly. "Especially after—" Well, after everything with Brandon and the loan. There's a difference between can't and won't, I replied gently. I couldn't risk co-signing an uncertain investment. That doesn't mean I don't have resources of my own. Olivia nodded slowly, processing this information. When can we see it? I close in 2 days. After that, you're all welcome any time. I smiled at her. Maybe you could help me choose paint colors. Sophie mentioned your new design course. The invitation, acknowledging her developing interest in interior design, something Brandon consistently dismissed as a hobby, clearly touched her. I'd love that, Mom. That evening, my phone rang unexpectedly. Brandon's name flashed on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Eleanor, he began without preamble, his voice artificially pleasant. Olivia tells me congratulations. Are in order. A new condominium? That's right, I confirmed, matching his tone. I close on Tuesday. Fascinating, he continued. Especially since you were so concerned about financial security when we discussed the Grayson estate. One might almost think you were being selective about where you invest your apparently substantial resources. The implication was clear. I had money, but had chosen not to help them. I took a deep breath before responding. Purchasing. A modest condominium within my means is quite different from co-signing a multi-million-dollar mortgage on a property well beyond yours, I pointed out. Surely you understand the distinction. What I understand, Brandon replied, his artificial pleasantness slipping, is that family supports family, or so I thought. Family also respects boundaries, I countered. Or so I hoped. A tense silence followed. When Brandon spoke again, his tone had shifted to something more calculating. Well, perhaps this is an opportunity to reset our expectations of each other. In fact, I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow evening, to clear the air, so to speak. The sudden change in attitude triggered immediate suspicion. Just the two of us? The whole family, he clarified. Olivia is already planning the menu. The children are excited to have you at our home again. It was the first invitation to their house since our confrontation over the loan. While skeptical of Brandon's motives, I couldn't deny my desire to normalize relations for the children's sake. What time should I arrive? 7 would be perfect, Brandon replied, the forced cordiality back in place. We have much to discuss. After hanging up, I sat in my half-packed apartment, contemplating Brandon's unexpected olive branch. His rapid shift from resentment to reconciliation seemed suspicious, especially given his reaction to learning about my condominium purchase. What had changed? What did he hope to gain? The next evening, I arrived at their colonial promptly at 7, bearing flowers for Olivia and books for the children. Brandon answered the door himself, greeting me with a warmth that seemed rehearsed. Eleanor, welcome back, he said expansively, taking my coat. It's been too long. The house smelled wonderful. Olivia's special rosemary chicken and roasted vegetables, a meal she reserved for important occasions. The dining room table was formally set, complete with the good china and crystal glasses usually stored in the cabinet. Everything about the setting suggested significance, a marked departure from Brandon's previous attitude. Olivia emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Mom, you're here. She embraced me warmly, whispering, Thank you for coming. It means a lot. Max and Sophie thundered down the stairs, enthusiastically updating me on everything I'd missed in their home life, from Sophie's new ballet shoes to Max's science project victory. Their natural, unfiltered joy at having me back in their house made any discomfort with Brandon worthwhile. Throughout dinner, Brandon was attentive, engaging, almost deferential, asking about my condominium, inquiring about my plans for furnishing it, even suggesting contractors for minor renovations. The dramatic shift from his previous hostility was jarring, leaving me increasingly curious about his true intentions. After dessert, when the children had been excused to finish homework, Brandon finally revealed his purpose. "Eleanor," he began, refilling my wine glass without asking, "Olivia and I have been reflecting on recent events, on how family disagreements spiraled into unnecessary distance." Olivia nodded earnestly beside him. "We've missed having you here, Mom." "The thing is," Brandon continued smoothly, "I've come to realize that I responded poorly to your decision about the Grayson estate. I took it personally when it was simply a financial choice." The admission was surprising, though his tone lacked genuine contrition. Still, it was more self-awareness than I'd expected from him. "I appreciate that, Brandon," I replied cautiously. "In fact," he continued, leaning forward slightly, "your decision turned out to be prescient. The Cutlers are already having problems with that property. Foundation issues the inspection missed, extensive water damage. A bullet dodged, really." "I'm sorry to hear about their troubles," I said, meaning it. Brandon waved dismissively. "Their misfortune, our education, which brings me to why we wanted to speak with you tonight." He glanced at Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. "We've been presented with an even better opportunity, one that makes the Grayson estate look positively pedestrian." And there it was, the real reason for the reconciliation, the formal dinner, the excessive charm, another financial proposition. I kept my expression neutral as Brandon continued. "Westlake Shores is developing an exclusive community on the north side of the lake. Only 12 homes, all custom-built, private beach access. The developer is an old Harvard classmate. He's offering us first selection of lots. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," I said carefully. "It's more than wonderful," Brandon enthused, fully in sales mode now. "It's transformative. These properties will appreciate at least 40% within 5 years. The networking opportunities alone. Senators have summer homes in that area, Eleanor. CEOs, people who can open doors for my projects." Olivia jumped in, clearly rehearsed. "The schools there are the best in the state, Mom. Max could join their advanced science program. Sophie would have access to their arts academy." I looked between them, these two people I loved in such different ways. My daughter, genuinely excited about opportunities for her children. Her husband, calculating the social climbing potential of a prestigious address. "The lots alone are going for $1 or $2 million, Brandon continued. "Building costs will run another $2 to $3 million depending on finishes. But James, my Harvard friend, is willing to hold the premier lakefront lot for us with just 30% down." "That's still a substantial sum," I observed. "Exactly why we wanted to discuss this with you," Brandon replied without missing a beat. "Given your recent property purchase, it's clear you have significant resources that could be leveraged for our family's collective advancement." There it was, the real purpose of the evening laid bare. Not reconciliation, but reconnaissance. Not apology, but opportunity. Brandon hadn't changed. He'd simply adjusted tactics. "You're suggesting I contribute to this purchase," I stated rather than asked. "An investment," Brandon corrected quickly. "You'd have equity in the property. And of course there would be space for you. Not just a guest house, but a complete in-law suite with separate entrance. Architecturally integrated but independent." The offer was being presented as generous, an inclusion rather than an afterthought. Yet the underlying dynamic remained unchanged. My value to their family measured by financial contribution rather than relational connection. "Have you considered that a $3 to $4 million custom home might be beyond your current financial situation?" I asked gently. "Particularly with the riverfront project still in development." Brandon's smile tightened slightly. "That's precisely why family support matters at critical junctures. The right address, the right connections. These things accelerate success. This isn't just a house, it's a launching pad." I took a careful sip of wine, considering my response. Olivia watched anxiously, clearly caught between her husband's ambitions and her awareness of my recent boundary setting. Brandon, I began, setting down my glass. What would happen if I declined to participate in this investment? His expression flickered briefly before regaining composure. I would hope we could separate financial decisions from family relationships better than we did previously. That was regrettable. Regrettable, I repeated. Yet here we are again, with my inclusion in this family seemingly contingent on financial contribution. That's not fair, Mom, Olivia interjected. We invited you tonight because we want to rebuild our relationship. By immediately asking for $1 million investment, I pointed out. Brandon's charm offensive faltered visibly. I thought you'd appreciate being included in family opportunities, given your unexpected financial liquidity. The phrase caught my attention immediately. My unexpected financial liquidity? What exactly do you mean by that? A brief telling glance passed between Brandon and Olivia. My daughter looked uncomfortable, but Brandon pressed on. Your condominium purchase, he explained. Obviously, it indicates resources beyond what we'd previously understood. I see. I folded my napkin carefully. And did you invite me to dinner tonight to reconnect with family, or to access those resources? The blunt question hung in the air. Olivia looked stricken, while Brandon's expression hardened into something more familiar. The calculating look he wore when business negotiations weren't proceeding as planned. I don't see why those have to be mutually exclusive, he replied, defensive now. Family supports each other's aspirations. Interesting, I said quietly. When I needed holiday support, just inclusion, not financial assistance, that principle didn't apply. Mom, that's not fair, Olivia protested weakly. Isn't it? I turned to her directly. Sweetheart, what happens if I say no to Westlake Shores? Will I still be welcome in your home? Will I still have access to my grandchildren? Or will I once again become inconvenient, relegated to supervised visits in neutral locations? Brandon stood abruptly. I think you're overreacting, Eleanor. No one is threatening anything about your relationship with the children. Aren't they? I challenged, remaining seated. Because history suggests otherwise. Olivia looked between us, clearly distressed. Can we please not do this? Mom, no one is pressuring you. If Westlake Shores isn't right for you as an investment, we understand. But Brandon was no longer bothering with pretense. Actually, I don't understand. If you have the means to help secure your grandchildren's future and choose not to, that's a statement about priorities. My grandchildren's future doesn't depend on a lakefront address, I replied evenly. It depends on stable, loving parents who live authentically within their means. Brandon's face flushed. So you're refusing, again. I'm declining to fund your social climbing ambitions, I clarified. That's not the same as refusing to support my family. He laughed bitterly. Semantic games. The bottom line is you have means but won't share them. Your comfortable condominium matters more than your daughter's opportunities. Brandon, stop, Olivia pleaded, clearly mortified. Mom doesn't owe us financial support. Doesn't she? He challenged, turning on her now. After everything we've done? The holidays we've included her in, the access to the children, the standing invitation to family functions. The mask had fully slipped now, revealing the transactional nature of Brandon's concept of family. I felt a profound sadness, not just for myself, but for Olivia and the children. Living with someone who viewed relationships as business arrangements, love as leverage. I think I should go, I said quietly, standing. Thank you for dinner, Olivia. It was delicious. Brandon stepped between me and the doorway. That's it? You're just leaving without even considering our proposal? Without even offering alternatives? I met his gaze steadily. I've considered it. My answer is no. Not because I can't, but because I won't enable financial decisions that create instability for my daughter and grandchildren. You know nothing about stability, he scoffed. Your middle-class teaching career, your modest investments. You think that qualifies you to lecture me on financial planning? Brandon, Olivia gasped. That's enough. But he was too far gone, frustration overriding caution. Your daughter married me specifically to escape your narrow, limited world. Did you know that? She wanted the connections, the possibilities, the lifestyle you could never provide. The cruel words landed precisely as intended. I looked at Olivia, whose face reflected horror and shame. Is that true? I asked softly. No, she insisted immediately. I married Brandon because I loved him. Still love him, she added, though the declaration sounded hollow even to my ears. Brandon laughed dismissively. Love is nice. Advancement is essential. You think she wants your grandchildren raised in your middle-class mediocrity? Working for others their whole lives? Never accessing true opportunity? What I think, I replied with remarkable calm, is that you define opportunity very differently than I do. And perhaps differently than my daughter does, if she were free. To speak honestly. The comment struck a nerve. Brandon stepped closer, his voice low and cutting. Don't presume to know what my wife thinks or wants. Unlike you, I provide for her. I advance her interests. I secure her future. By pressuring her mother for money you can't afford to spend? I asked gently. By risking financial instability to maintain appearances? Brandon's face contorted. With anger. Get out. You've made your position clear. Now get out of my house. Brandon, no! Olivia cried, grabbing his arm. Mom, please, he doesn't mean it. He's just stressed about the project deadlines. I picked up my purse, calm, despite the turmoil. It's all right, Olivia. I think we all need space to reflect on what's truly important. As I moved toward the door, Max appeared on the stairs, Sophie clutching his hand, both in pajamas with worried expressions. Why is everybody yelling? Max asked, his voice small. Is Grandma leaving already? I forced a smile. Just heading home, sweetheart. I'll see you both very soon. Promise? Sophie asked anxiously. Daddy said last time that you might not come back. Brandon had the decency to look uncomfortable at his daughter's innocent repetition of his manipulation. I walked to the stairs and knelt to their eye level. Nothing, absolutely nothing could keep me from seeing you, I assured them. I love you both more than anything in this world. Brandon cleared his throat. Children, back to bed, now. Grandma is leaving. His tone left no room for argument. After quick hugs, the children retreated upstairs, casting worried glances over their shoulders. Olivia followed me to the door, her eyes brimming with tears. He's not always like this, she whispered urgently. The project pressure, the financing issues, it's bringing out the worst in him. I touched her cheek gently. Or revealing the truth of him, I suggested. Pressure doesn't create character, Olivia. It exposes it. She flinched slightly, unable to refute what we both knew. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised. As I drove back to my apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes for my impending move, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The evening had been painful but illuminating. Brandon's mask had slipped completely, revealing the transactional nature of his worldview. More importantly, Olivia had witnessed it, had even, briefly, stood against it. The next morning, as promised, Olivia called. Her voice was subdued, apologetic. Mom, I'm so sorry about last night. Brandon was completely out of line. Yes, he was, I agreed, not softening the truth. But perhaps it was necessary. Now we all understand where we stand. He didn't mean those things about why I married him, she insisted. He was just lashing out because of the project stress. 2 investors pulled out last week. The whole development might be in jeopardy. I absorbed this information carefully. Financial pressure reveals priorities, Olivia. Pay attention to what's being revealed. A long silence followed. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I think I've made a terrible mistake. The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. What do you mean, sweetheart? Everything, she admitted. The house we can barely afford, the private schools straining our budget, the social obligations that keep us running on a hamster wheel. She paused, then added the most telling detail. Last night after you left, I found Brandon on the phone with his mother, asking if she could liquidate some assets to help with the Westlake Shores down payment. He didn't know I was listening. What happened? She refused, said she'd tried to warn him about marrying beneath his prospects and wouldn't keep funding his attempts to overcome that disadvantage. The cruelty of Diane Parker's assessment didn't surprise me, but its nakedness did. I'm so sorry, Olivia. When he saw me, he was furious, accused me of spying, said if I'd just convinced you to contribute, he wouldn't have had to grovel to that bitter old woman. Her voice broke slightly. Then he said something I can't stop thinking about. What was it? He said, your mother could solve all our problems if she wanted to. The fact that she won't proves she doesn't really care about your future. Olivia's tone shifted from hurt to something harder. That's when I realized he sees you, sees all of us, as nothing but financial resources. Not people, not family, just potential assets or liabilities. The realization, though painful, was necessary. And how did that make you feel? Sick, she admitted, and then angry, really angry. I told him he was the one who didn't care about my future, that leveraging us into debt for appearances wasn't love, it was vanity. Her voice strengthened as she recounted the confrontation. I asked him why my mother should fund his ambitions when his own mother wouldn't. That really set him off. I can imagine, I said quietly. He stormed out, didn't come home until after 3. She took a deep breath. Mom, I need to ask you something important, and I need complete honesty. Always, I promised. Do you have money I don't know about? Something beyond your teacher's pension and the house sale? Because the condominium in this market? She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the direct question. I considered my response carefully. The trust remained private knowledge, but Olivia deserved some truth about my situation. Your father was always better with money than he let on, I explained. He made some investments that have performed well since his passing. I'm comfortable, Olivia. More than comfortable. But that doesn't change my assessment of Brandon's proposals or his approach to family relationships. I understand, she said quietly. I think I'm starting to see things clearly for the first time in years. Clarity can be painful, I acknowledged. It is, she agreed, but necessary. After a slight pause, she added, I'd like to help with your move tomorrow, if that's okay. The kids and I. Brandon has meetings all day. I'd love that, I replied, genuinely pleased. But are you sure? I don't want to create more tension in your home. Some tension might be exactly what's needed, she said with newfound resolve. Besides, the kids are desperate to see your new place. They've been drawing pictures of how they want to decorate their rooms for sleepovers. The next day dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for moving. The closing on my condominium had gone smoothly, and professional movers had already transferred my limited belongings from the apartment. Olivia arrived with Max and Sophie shortly after noon, bearing houseplants, homemade cookies, and cheerful energy. The children raced through the empty rooms, claiming spaces and suggesting paint colors with uninhibited enthusiasm. Olivia moved more deliberately, examining architectural details, light patterns, views from various windows. Her design course training was evident in her thoughtful assessment. "Mom, this place is wonderful," she said finally. "The proportions, the natural light, the location, you chose perfectly." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased by her approval. It felt right from the moment I first saw it. As we unpacked kitchen essentials and arranged furniture, Olivia shared more details about her confrontation with Brandon. His financial situation was apparently more precarious than I'd realized. The riverfront project had encountered permitting issues. Cost overruns had depleted their savings. Several credit cards were approaching their limits. "He's been hiding the statements from me," she admitted, carefully unwrapping my mother's china. "I found them by accident when I was looking for insurance documents last week." "That's concerning," I said gently. "It's deceptive," she corrected, her tone hardening. "We're supposed to be partners. I trusted him with our financial security, and he's been gambling with it." I arranged silverware in a drawer, choosing my words carefully. "What are you thinking of doing?" She placed a teacup in the cabinet with deliberate precision. "I'm not sure yet, but I've made an appointment with a financial advisor next week. I need to understand exactly where we stand." "That's a good start," I encouraged. She hesitated, then continued with more determination. "I've updated my resume, just in case. My marketing skills are still valuable. If things get worse, I need options." Pride swelled in my chest at her proactive approach. "You always were a problem solver." "I learned from the best," she replied with a small smile. "You never let circumstances define you. After Dad died, you didn't just survive. You reimagined your future. I need to channel some of that strength now." We worked companionably through the afternoon, the children helping in their enthusiastic, if somewhat chaotic way. By evening, the condominium had transformed from empty space to emerging home. Furniture arranged, kitchen functional, beds made. We celebrated with delivered pizza eaten picnic style on the living room floor. As they prepared to leave, Olivia lingered in the doorway. "Would it be okay if the kids stayed with you tomorrow night? Brandon has a dinner with potential investors, and I'd normally ask our regular sitter, but it would be more fun here," I finished for her. "Of course they can stay. Their rooms are ready and waiting." Her relief was palpable. "Thank you. And maybe I could join them? After Brandon's dinner? I could bring breakfast stuff for Sunday morning." The request, so tentative, so unlike the confident social director she usually portrayed, revealed volumes about the state of her marriage. "This is your home too, Olivia. Always." She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I've missed you so much," before gathering the children and departing. The next evening brought joyful chaos. Board games, popcorn, bedtime stories in newly decorated rooms. When Olivia arrived around 9, her expression was strained despite her attempts at cheerfulness. After the children were asleep, we sat in my small living room, lamplight casting warm pools against the February darkness outside. Olivia cradled a mug of tea between her palms, staring into its depths. "Brandon's investors backed out," she finally said. "The entire riverfront project is collapsing. 6 months of work, gone. Along with the marketing budget he'd already spent." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "I know how much he'd pinned on that development." "That's not even the worst part," she continued. "On my way out tonight, I checked the mail. There was a letter from Max's school. Our payment for the coming semester is overdue. Second notice." She looked up, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Brandon told me he'd paid it weeks ago. He lied to my face, Mom." I reached for her hand. "What can I do?" "Nothing," she said, firmly. This is my mess to handle. I just needed— She gestured vaguely. This. Space to think. Someone who listens without judging. I'm always here, I reminded her. But Olivia, financial deception in a marriage is serious. It's not just about money. I know, she whispered. It's about trust, about partnership, about the foundation we're building our family on. She set down her mug with sudden decision. I'm meeting with the financial advisor Monday morning. I've already told Brandon it's non-negotiable. I need to see everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts. Complete transparency. How did he respond? Her smile was brittle. Not well, but he doesn't have much choice. The riverfront collapse has left him vulnerable. He needs me to maintain appearances. The calculated assessment, so unlike Olivia's usual optimistic nature, revealed how deeply Brandon's influence had shaped her worldview. Still, her determination to confront reality marked an important shift. The weekend passed in gentle domesticity, pancake breakfasts, a trip to the nearby park, board games by the fire. Brandon called several times, his messages increasingly terse as Olivia maintained her boundary of spending the full weekend at my condominium. By Sunday evening, when she finally gathered the children to return home, her shoulders seemed straighter, her decisions more confident. I'll call you after the financial meeting tomorrow, she promised. And thank you, Mom, for everything. Monday morning, I busied myself with unpacking the remaining boxes, arranging books, hanging artwork. Around 11, my phone rang. Not Olivia as expected, but James Whitaker. Eleanor, he began without preamble, I thought you should know that Brandon Parker just called my office. My pulse quickened. What did he want? Information about Robert's estate, specifically whether there were any trusts or investment accounts that might have been overlooked during the initial probate process. The direct attempt to investigate my finances, circumventing me entirely, was breathtakingly brazen. What did you tell him? That client information is confidential, and that any inquiries about Robert's estate should come from you directly. James's tone was professional but carried an undercurrent of disapproval. He was quite persistent. Mentioned something about family financial planning and ensuring all resources are properly allocated. I imagine he did, I said dryly. Eleanor, James continued more gently, this raises concerns. His approach was inappropriate at best, potentially predatory at worst. Has something happened to trigger this inquiry? I explained the dinner confrontation, Brandon's Westlake Shores proposal, and Olivia's growing awareness of their financial precarity. James listened without interruption, his silence becoming increasingly weighted. The timing troubles me, he said finally. Brandon's sudden interest in Robert's estate, combined with his financial desperation, suggests escalation. People in his position sometimes take drastic measures when conventional avenues close. You think he might try to access my finances through Olivia? The possibility hadn't occurred to me until that moment. I think caution is warranted, James replied carefully. Desperation makes people unpredictable. After hanging up, I paced. My new living room. Anxiety building. Olivia had mentioned a 9 a.m. appointment with the financial advisor. It was now past 11. Why hadn't she called? Just as I reached for my phone to call her, it rang in my hand. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. Mom, she began, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Can you come to the house? Now? I need you here for an important conversation with Brandon. Of course, I replied immediately. Are you all right? Not really, she admitted. But I will be. Please hurry. The drive to their colonial took only 15 minutes, but my mind raced through worst-case scenarios the entire way. When I arrived, Olivia answered the door immediately, her face pale but composed. "Thank you for coming," she said formally, as if we were business associates rather than mother and daughter. "Brandon is in the dining room. The children are at school." The unusual formality heightened my concern. Following her to the dining room, I found Brandon seated at the table, surrounded by stacks of papers, financial statements, bank records, investment reports. His expression was thunderous, barely contained rage simmering beneath a veneer of civility. "Eleanor," he acknowledged tightly, "how kind of you to join our little financial summit." "Brandon," I replied evenly, taking the seat Olivia indicated opposite him. "I understand there's something important to discuss." Olivia remained standing, her posture unnaturally rigid. "I wanted you here as a witness, Mom. And because what I'm about to say affects you too." Brandon's laugh was harsh. "Oh, it absolutely affects her. More than she realizes." Olivia shot him a quelling look before continuing. "The meeting with the financial advisor was illuminating. Our situation is worse than I imagined. Much worse." "Every business involves risk," Brandon interjected defensively. "Temporary setbacks are part of the process." "Maxing out 6 credit cards isn't a temporary setback," Olivia countered, her voice steady despite the damning accusation. "Neither is taking a second mortgage on our home without discussing it with me, or withdrawing from the children's college funds to cover business expenses." Each revelation landed like a physical blow. Brandon's financial deceptions were apparently far more extensive than we'd realized. "I was protecting you from unnecessary worry," he insisted. "The riverfront project would have solved everything if your mother had just—" "Don't, Olivia," cut him off sharply. "Don't you dare blame my mother for your financial mismanagement." The directness of her confrontation, so unlike her usual peacekeeping approach, clearly startled Brandon. He adjusted tactics immediately, his expression softening into practiced contrition. "You're right, of course," he conceded, reaching for her hand across the table. "I've made mistakes, serious ones, but we can fix this together, as a family." Olivia withdrew her hand from his reach. "That's why I asked Mom to join us. Because your definition of fixing this as a family is concerning me." Brandon's gaze flicked to me, calculation replacing contrition. "Eleanor is financially secure now. Her resources could help stabilize our situation temporarily. A family loan, nothing more." "A family loan," Olivia repeated flatly. "Like the $150,000 my parents contributed to our down payment? The loan that was never documented and never repaid?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "That was different. A gift, not a loan." "Was it?" Olivia challenged. "Because I distinctly remember promises about repayment once your business turned the corner." The tension in the room was palpable. I remained silent, recognizing that this confrontation belonged primarily to Olivia, her awakening, her boundaries, her marriage. My role was witness and support, not primary participant. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Brandon asked, his voice dangerously soft. Olivia took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting that our financial practices need radical restructuring, immediate financial transparency, significant lifestyle adjustments, and most importantly, no more attempts to leverage my mother's resources to solve problems of your creation." The directness of her stance, the clarity of her boundary, filled me with fierce pride. Brandon, however, was clearly not accustomed to such direct challenge from his wife. "Your mother's resources," he repeated slowly. "You mean the mysterious windfall that appeared just in time for her condominium purchase? The funds she conveniently discovered after refusing to help with the Grayson estate?" Olivia frowned. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Brandon replied, his tone sharpening. "I'm stating facts. Your mother's financial situation changed dramatically after Robert's death." more dramatically than a teacher's pension and modest home sale can explain. He turned to me directly. James Whittaker was remarkably unhelpful when I called with perfectly reasonable questions about Robert's estate, almost as if he was deliberately concealing information that should rightfully be shared with family. The accusatory tone triggered immediate protective instincts, but I kept my expression neutral. My financial arrangements are private, Brandon, just as yours should be with your wife, though apparently they haven't been. His face flushed with anger. This isn't about me. It's about family resources being deliberately hidden while we struggle. Resources that Robert may have intended for his daughter and grandchildren. Don't you dare invoke my father's intentions, Olivia said, her voice vibrating with controlled fury. Dad valued financial responsibility above all. He would be horrified by what you've done with our family's security. Brandon stood abruptly, papers scattering. What I've done? I've been trying to give you the life you deserve. The connections, the opportunities, the status. I never asked for status, Olivia countered. I asked for partnership, for honesty, for security for our children. She gestured at the financial statements littering the table. You've risked everything on appearances. Our home equity, our credit, our children's education funds, all while lying to my face about our true financial situation. The raw truth hung in the air between them. Brandon's carefully constructed facade of successful provider was crumbling, revealing the desperate gambler beneath. His gaze shifted to me, the last potential solution to his financial house of cards. Eleanor, he began, his tone abruptly conciliatory. I understand your hesitation. My approach has been imperfect, but surely you can see that helping Olivia and your grandchildren through this temporary setback is the right thing to do. Before I could respond, Olivia interjected, Stop it, Brandon. My mother isn't responsible for fixing this. We are. She turned to me. That's why I asked you here, Mom. Not to request financial help, but to witness my decision and support the boundaries I'm establishing. What boundaries? Brandon demanded, voice rising. Olivia met his gaze steadily. I've consulted an attorney. I'm prepared to file for legal separation if you don't agree to complete financial transparency, credit counseling, and significant lifestyle adjustments, including selling this house for something within our actual means. The ultimatum landed with seismic impact. Brandon's face cycled through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally calculation. You're bluffing, he said finally. You wouldn't separate our family over temporary financial challenges. I would absolutely separate our family over fundamental breaches of trust, Olivia corrected. The finances are a symptom, not the disease. Brandon turned to me, desperation edging into his expression. Talk sense into her, Eleanor. She's not thinking clearly. Emotional decisions in times of stress lead to regrets. On the contrary, I replied calmly. I think Olivia is thinking more clearly than she has in years, and I support her completely, whatever she decides. The united front clearly rattled him. Brandon's confident facade cracked entirely, revealing naked panic beneath. You don't understand. I've committed to investments, made promises. If I don't deliver, my professional reputation... Your professional reputation should reflect reality, Olivia interrupted. Not a fiction built on credit card debt and hidden mortgages. Brandon's expression hardened into something ugly. This is your doing, he accused, pointing at me. Turning my wife against me, undermining my authority in my own home. Your actions have done that quite effectively without my help, I replied evenly. Get out, he snapped. This is between me and my wife. You've done enough damage. Olivia stepped between us. My mother stays. This conversation isn't finished. Oh, it's finished, Brandon retorted, gathering papers hastily. If you're seriously threatening legal separation over a few financial missteps, Then we have nothing more to discuss until you've come to your senses. Brandon, Olivia began, but he was already storming toward the door, briefcase half closed. Papers spilling. Think carefully about your next move, he called over his shoulder. Divorce isn't the clean break you imagine. Assets get scrutinized, all assets, including mysterious windfalls that appear conveniently after a parent's death. The thinly veiled threat hung in the air as the front door slammed behind him. Olivia sank into a chair, hands trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. "No," she admitted, "but I will be." She looked up at me, eyes clear despite her obvious distress. "I meant what I said, Mom. I didn't ask you here to request money. I need emotional support, not financial bailout." I moved to the chair beside her, taking her hands in mine. "You have my complete support, whatever path you choose." She nodded gratefully. "There's something else you should know. Something," the financial advisor discovered. She hesitated, then continued. "Brandon has been researching estate challenges, looking into grounds for contesting wills and trusts. Specifically, cases where adult children successfully claimed assets that weren't initially left to them." The revelation sent a chill through me. James had been right to be concerned about Brandon's inquiries. He's looking for ways to access what he believes Robert left me. "Yes," Olivia confirmed. "The search history was on our shared computer. He didn't even bother hiding it." She squeezed my hands. "Mom, if Dad left you protected financially, you need to make sure Brandon can't access those resources through me or the grandchildren. I don't trust his intentions right now." The maturity of her concern, prioritizing my protection despite her own crisis, moved me deeply. "Your father was very thorough," I assured her. "The arrangements he made are legally sound." "Good," she said firmly, "because Brandon won't stop easily, especially now that I've confronted him." The remainder of the day passed in careful planning. Olivia contacted her attorney again, requesting an emergency consultation. I helped her gather essential financial documents, creating duplicate records of Brandon's deceptions. By late afternoon, when the children returned from school, we had established preliminary protective measures for the turbulent days ahead. That evening, after returning to my condominium, I called James Whitaker with a complete update. His reaction confirmed my growing concerns. "Brandon's research into estate challenges is troubling," he acknowledged. "While Robert's trust arrangements are legally sound, aggressive litigation can create complications and delays." "What should I do?" I asked. "Documentation," James advised. "Record every interaction with Brandon going forward. Save texts, emails, voicemails, anything that demonstrates his financial motivations or potential manipulation. And consider consulting your own attorney, separate from Olivia's. Family law and estate protection sometimes require different expertise." I followed his advice immediately, contacting Thomas Chen, our longtime family lawyer. Thomas agreed to meet the following morning to review potential protective measures for both Robert's trust and my relationship with my grandchildren. The conversation left me simultaneously reassured and unsettled, prepared but aware of the potential storms ahead. Brandon returned home late that night, according to Olivia's text messages. He was subdued, apologetic, promising to find solutions that work for everyone. The sudden shift from rage to reconciliation triggered immediate suspicion in both of us. Brandon's pattern of tactical adjustment was becoming predictably unpredictable. Charm when intimidation failed, contrition when aggression backfired. The next morning brought the first countermove in Brandon's revised strategy. As I prepared for my meeting with Thomas Chen, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening it revealed Diane Parker, Brandon's mother, impeccably dressed and coldly composed. "Eleanor," she greeted with manufactured warmth, "I hope I'm not interrupting your morning. I felt it was time we had a proper conversation, woman to woman." The unexpected appearance of Brandon's mother, A woman who had consistently maintained polite distance throughout Olivia and Brandon's marriage, was transparent tactical escalation. Still, refusing her entry would only reinforce whatever narrative Brandon had constructed. "Of course," I replied, stepping aside. "Please come in." Diane entered with the measured assessment of a property appraiser, her gaze cataloging each element of my new home. "Lovely condominium," she observed, the compliment thinly disguising evaluation. "Riverdale Heights has become quite the desirable address. Property values here have increased significantly in recent years." "I was fortunate with the timing," I acknowledged, gesturing toward the living room seating. "Coffee?" "No, thank you," she declined, selecting the armchair that afforded the best view of the entire space. "This won't take long." I seated myself opposite her, waiting. Diane Parker had not appeared on my doorstep for casual conversation. "I'll be direct," she began, adjusting her designer scarf with manicured precision. "Brandon has shared certain concerns about family dynamics, about financial transparency and mutual support during challenging times." "Has he?" I replied neutrally. "Indeed." Her smile remained fixed, not reaching her eyes. "Family resources should benefit the entire family, don't you agree? Particularly when those resources derive from a shared heritage." The implication was clear. Brandon had convinced his mother that I was somehow hoarding family wealth that rightfully belonged to Olivia. The manipulation was expertly crafted to appeal to Diane's existing prejudices about my background and worth. "I believe in financial responsibility," I countered carefully, "in living within one's means rather than accumulating debt to maintain appearances." Diane's smile tightened fractionally. "Noble sentiments. However, appearances matter in certain circles. Connections matter. The right address, the right schools, the right associations. These aren't frivolous considerations but essential investments in future security." "At what cost?" I asked. "Whatever cost necessary," she replied, without hesitation. "Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. I understand there may be resources from Robert's estate that weren't initially disclosed during standard probate proceedings." The directness of the inquiry, following Brandon's research into estate challenges, confirmed the coordinated nature of their approach. Mother and son were working in tandem, seeking financial access through different angles. "My husband's estate was handled with complete legal propriety," I stated firmly. "All appropriate disclosures were made." "Of course," Diane conceded smoothly. "But family arrangements often exist outside formal legal structures, verbal understandings, intended provisions for grandchildren, promises between spouses about future allocations. If you're suggesting Robert made promises regarding his estate that weren't fulfilled, you're mistaken," I replied, maintaining composed directness. "My husband was meticulous about financial matters. Everything was properly documented and executed, according to his explicit wishes." Diane leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering conspirationally. "Eleanor, let's be frank. Brandon and Olivia are experiencing temporary financial challenges. Nothing serious, merely timing issues with project funding. As mothers, surely we share concern for the stability of their household, for the opportunities available to Max and Sophie." "I'm very concerned about their household stability," I agreed carefully. "Particularly given the significant debt Brandon has accumulated without Olivia's knowledge or consent." Diane's expression flickered briefly before resettling into practiced pleasantness. "Business ventures involve calculated risks. Brandon's vision requires certain provisional arrangements to bridge between planning and completion phases. Is that what we're calling credit card debt and secret second mortgages now? Provisional arrangements?" The directness clearly startled her. Diane's composure slipped momentarily, revealing genuine surprise. "I'm not sure what Olivia has told you, but I assure you Brandon's financial management is entirely appropriate for someone in his position." his position being significantly overextended with minimal income to support existing obligations, I clarified, let alone new investments in Westlake Shores properties. Diane's surprise shifted to calculation. You seem remarkably well informed about their financial details. Olivia is finally becoming well informed, I corrected, and sharing that information with me because she recognizes the pattern of manipulation at work. Manipulation, Diane repeated coldly. A rather serious accusation. Fact, not accusation, I countered. Brandon has systematically hidden their true financial situation from Olivia while simultaneously pressuring me for family support that would primarily fund his social climbing ambitions. The pretense of pleasant negotiation evaporated completely. Diane's expression hardened into something more authentic, cold assessment and barely disguised disdain. Let me be absolutely clear, she said, voice sharp as cut glass. Brandon comes from a family with significant social connections. His Harvard education and business associations represent opportunities that your daughter would never have accessed otherwise. The financial contributions required to maintain those advantages are investments in their future, not frivolous expenditures. And yet you refused to provide those contributions yourself when Brandon requested them, I observed. Interesting prioritization of family support. Diane's face flushed slightly. My financial arrangements are complex, asset-rich but temporarily cash-constrained. How convenient, I remarked. The exact explanation Brandon offered for your inability to help with the Grayson estate. This isn't about me, she snapped, composure cracking further. It's about your responsibility to support your daughter's family. If Robert left resources that could ease their current challenges, withholding that support is unconscionable. I stood, signaling the conversation's end. My responsibility is to protect my daughter and grandchildren from financial exploitation, whether from strangers or family members. Robert's estate was handled exactly as he intended. If Brandon has financial challenges, I suggest he address them through honest work and responsible budgeting, not by attempting to access money that isn't his. Diane rose as well, gathering her designer handbag with deliberate dignity. You're making a serious mistake, Eleanor. Family conflicts become ugly when financial disparities remain unaddressed. Is that a threat? I asked calmly. Merely an observation, she replied, moving toward the door. Brandon and Olivia's marriage represents important social connections for all involved. Connections that benefit your grandchildren's future opportunities. Jeopardizing those connections over financial territoriality seems remarkably short-sighted. I opened the door, maintaining composed politeness despite my internal anger. Thank you for your visit, Diane. I'll give your observations all the consideration they deserve. Her parting smile was arctic. Do remember that estate challenges can become quite public. Family history gets thoroughly examined. Every decision, every relationship, every potential impropriety exposed to scrutiny. For everyone's sake, I hope more private arrangements can be reached. As the door closed behind her, I leaned against it, processing the escalation her visit represented. Brandon was clearly mobilizing family resources, not financial but social and potentially legal, to pressure access to what he believed was hidden wealth. The thinly veiled threats about public scrutiny and estate challenges confirmed James's concerns about Brandon's research into contesting Robert's arrangements. I immediately called Thomas Chen, updating him about Diane's visit before our scheduled meeting. His response was measured but concerned. Document everything, he advised. Time content implied threats. We'll review all of it during our meeting. This pattern of escalation suggests Brandon may be preparing more formal challenges to Robert's estate arrangements. Can he actually contest a properly established trust? I asked. He can attempt to, Thomas acknowledged. Success would be unlikely given the careful legal work James and Robert completed. However, the process itself can be disruptive and emotionally taxing. And potentially damaging to my relationship with Olivia and the grandchildren, I added, voicing my deeper fear. That's the leverage he's counting on, Thomas confirmed. The threat of family conflict often proves more effective than actual legal action. It's a pressure tactic, Eleanor. One we need to prepare for thoroughly. After hanging up, I texted Olivia a brief summary of Diane's visit, wanting to ensure she heard about it directly from me rather than through Brandon's filtered perspective. Her response was immediate and supportive. Unbelievable. I'm so sorry, Mom. This is getting out of hand. Can we talk tonight after the kids are in bed? The solidarity was reassuring, but concerns lingered. Brandon had demonstrated remarkable skill at manipulating perceptions, presenting financial recklessness as visionary investment, controlling behavior as protective care. If pressured further, would he attempt to drive wedges between Olivia and me? Between me and my grandchildren? The possibilities were concerning, but not paralyzing. Robert had protected me financially. I would need to protect my family relationships with equal thoroughness. The meeting with Thomas Chen proved productively strategic. We documented recent interactions with Brandon and Diane, reviewed the trust arrangements James had established, and discussed protective measures for my relationships with Olivia and the grandchildren. Thomas recommended recording all future conversations with Brandon whenever legally permissible, maintaining detailed logs of communication patterns, and establishing consistent documentation of my involvement in the grandchildren's lives. If this escalates toward custody or visitation disputes, he explained, established patterns of involvement will be critically important. Courts prioritize existing relationships and consistent presence. The fact that we needed to discuss potential custody implications sent a chill through me. Brandon's desperation, combined with his mother's social connections, created unpredictable risk factors. Thomas's thorough preparation was simultaneously reassuring and alarming. Necessary protection against worst-case scenarios I hoped would never materialize. That evening, Olivia called as promised. Her voice was strained but determined. Brandon came home with a complete change in approach, she reported. Suddenly he's talking about fresh starts and transparent financial planning. Even suggested meeting with a credit counselor. That seems positive, I observed cautiously. It would be, she agreed, if it weren't immediately followed by suggestions about exploring all family resources and ensuring Robert's legacy supports his grandchildren as he would have wanted. The tactical shift was transparent, from direct pressure to insidious suggestion, from confrontation to manipulation. How did you respond? I told him any financial planning needed to focus on living within our actual means, not accessing imaginary resources he believes might exist elsewhere. Her tone hardened. I also made it clear that my relationship with you and Dad's estate arrangements are completely separate issues from our marriage challenges. How did he take that? Not well, she admitted, but he controlled his reaction. That's actually more concerning than when he loses his temper. Calculated Brandon is always more dangerous than impulsive Brandon. The assessment demonstrated how clearly Olivia now saw her husband's patterns, a clarity that had been missing during years of gradual manipulation. Have you decided your next steps? I'm proceeding with the legal separation filing, she confirmed. My attorney is preparing the papers now. Brandon doesn't know yet. I want everything in place before I tell him. After the judge denied Brandon's emergency custody petition, citing concerning indications of ulterior motives, he shifted tactics. Instead of pursuing custody, he filed a formal challenge to Robert's trust, claiming my late husband lacked mental capacity when establishing it. It was a desperate attempt to force disclosure of the financial details he'd been obsessing over. Thomas and James arrived at my condominium that evening to discuss this latest development. The children were watching a movie in the living room, while we spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen. Brandon's allegations are completely unsupported, Thomas assured me. We have extensive documentation of Robert's competence, including videotaped statements about his intentions. This revelation provided unexpected comfort. Even from beyond, Robert had anticipated and prepared for challenges to his carefully constructed protections. What's truly interesting, James added, is that Diane Parker contacted me this morning, requesting a private meeting to discuss potential resolution of family financial matters. This suggested fractures in Brandon and Diane's united front. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet Diane with both Thomas and James present as protection against manipulation. The meeting took place at Thomas's office 3 days later. Diane arrived alone, dressed impeccably as always, but with a weariness that hadn't been present during her previous confrontational visit to my condominium. "Eleanor," she began after minimal pleasantries, "this situation has escalated beyond reasonable boundaries. Brandon's pursuit of litigation is becoming excessive." "I agree," I replied simply. "While I support my son," she continued carefully, "I recognize when certain approaches become counterproductive. The custody petition was ill-advised. The trust challenge risks public embarrassment with minimal chance of success." Her concern for social appearances rather than actual justice wasn't surprising, but her willingness to acknowledge the weakness of Brandon's position represented significant shift. "What are you proposing?" Thomas asked directly. "Practical resolution," Diane replied. "Brandon believes substantial assets exist that should benefit his children. His methods of pursuing those assets have become problematic. Perhaps there's middle ground that protects Eleanor's interests while acknowledging legitimate considerations for Max and Sophie's future." It was the first reasonable statement I'd heard from the Parker family in months. While still fundamentally self-interested, it recognized reality rather than demanding capitulation. "I've always intended to support my grandchildren's future," I said carefully. "Through education funds, through meaningful experiences, through consistent presence in their lives. What I won't do is fund Brandon's social climbing ambitions under the guise of family support." Diane nodded slowly. "That distinction seems fair. Perhaps we could discuss specific arrangements for the children that bypass Brandon's direct control while still providing meaningful support." The conversation that followed was remarkably productive. With Thomas and James guiding technical aspects, we outlined potential structures for education trusts for Max and Sophie, controlled by independent trustees, accessible only for legitimate educational expenses, completely separate from Brandon's financial influence. 2 days later, Brandon reluctantly withdrew his challenge to Robert's trust in exchange for the education fund arrangement. His capitulation wasn't gracious, but Diane's influence, combined with realistic assessment of his legal position, finally penetrated his determination to access the Maine trust assets. Meanwhile, Olivia's separation proceeded with increasing clarity and confidence. She secured the marketing position with the nonprofit organization, finalized arrangements for their new apartment, and established consistent co-parenting boundaries, despite Brandon's occasional manipulative attempts. Most importantly, Max and Sophie began adjusting to their new normal with remarkable resilience. Regular routines, honest age-appropriate explanations, and consistent emotional support provided stability during the transition. They divided time between Brandon's house and Olivia's new apartment, with frequent visits to my condominium maintaining our strong grandparent bond. 6 months after the holiday rejection that had started this journey, Olivia and I sat on my balcony watching the children play in the condominium's garden below. She looked more peaceful than she had in years. The constant tension of maintaining appearances finally lifted from her shoulders. "Mom," she said suddenly, "I need to thank you for something important." "What's that, sweetheart?" "For not rescuing me financially," she replied with surprising directness. "When Brandon was pressuring you about co-signing loans or contributing to his schemes, you could have just written checks to make the problem go away, to keep the peace." I considered this assessment carefully. that wouldn't have solved the actual problem. Exactly, she agreed. It would have enabled his patterns, kept me trapped in a situation that was slowly destroying my self-worth. She watched her children's play with thoughtful attention. Instead, you gave me something far more valuable than money. What was that? The chance to rediscover my strength, she said simply. To remember who I was before I started measuring my value through Brandon's social aspirations. To rebuild life on authentic foundations rather than appearances. Her insight brought tears to my eyes. Your father would be so proud of you. He'd be proud of both of us, she corrected gently. You held firm when it would have been easier to give in. You protected what Dad entrusted to you, not just financial resources, but the values that mattered to him, to us. Below us, Sophie called up excitedly about a butterfly she'd discovered, her delight untainted by the adult complexities we'd navigated. Max was constructing an elaborate fortress from garden stones, his confidence growing daily in this new, more honest chapter of family life. Watching them, I felt profound gratitude for Robert's foresight in creating financial safeguards that had ultimately protected more than money. They'd protected our family's integrity, our relationships, our future. When Brandon had tried to use holiday exclusion as emotional leverage, he'd inadvertently triggered a journey toward greater authenticity for all of us. The most valuable inheritance wasn't in trust accounts or legal documents. It lived in the values we chose to honor, the boundaries we learned to maintain, and the unconditional love that survived even the most calculated attempts to monetize it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.